the kind that doesn't know where to go, so it starts attacking the nearest available target, each other. And slowly but surely, the same unity they used to come after you began collapsing under its own lies. Heaven didn't just block their attack, it turned their altar into a battlefield. The fire they lit to burn you ended up consuming their trust in each other. And now the ones who once stood shoulder to shoulder in wickedness can't even look each other in the eye. The sacrifice failed, and so did the sacrifices. All because God said, "Not this one." Number 3, their bond was built on shared hatred, not loyalty. The truth is they were never really united to begin with. They weren't bonded by loyalty, respect, or real love. They were glued together by a common hatred of you. That was the only thing holding them in the same room. As long as they had a shared enemy, they felt powerful. But when heaven refused to let them touch you, the glue dried up and everything fell apart. Without you as the target, they had nothing to distract them from their own dysfunction. That's when the real cracks started to show. They were so busy watching you that they didn't realize how fragile their so-called alliance actually was. It wasn't built on trust. It was built on bitterness. They weren't teammates. They were trauma-bonded, rage-driven, and desperate to destroy something brighter than them. When God pulled you out of the line of fire, they had no one left to project their mess onto. And the moment their common focus disappeared, the knives they were sharpening for you started turning inward. Now they're blaming each other for the failure. One thinks the other wasn't committed enough. Another thinks someone secretly warned you. Another feels used and manipulated. It's chaos. And it's all because the foundation of their connection was fake from the beginning. People who come together to tear someone down always end up tearing each other apart. That's the law. You weren't just protected. Your protection revealed the weakness in their so-called unity, and that's the irony. They never stood a chance, not just because God covered you, but because they were only ever strong when standing against someone else. They had no real bond, just a shared mission rooted in envy and offense. Once the mission failed, the mask slipped off. Now they can't trust each other. Now they question every word, every move, every intention. And the more they turn on each other, the more obvious it becomes. They never really liked one another to begin with. They just hated you more than they hated their own reflection. And now that they're left alone with themselves, the truth is eating them alive. Number 4, heaven sealed you in an invisible courtroom. They thought they were moving in secret, but the whole time you were standing in a divine courtroom, not as the accused, but as the protected. Heaven had already sealed your name, your calling, and your reputation in spiritual law. You weren't just favored, you were filed, recorded, and witnessed by higher jurisdiction. Everything they did to you was being documented. Every lie, every setup, every attempt to sabotage you, logged, time-stamped, and waiting for judgment. You didn't even know it at the time, but while they were dragging your name through the mud, trying to pull you into chaos, they were actually dragging themselves into a trial they couldn't win. They were convinced they were in control. They thought their gossip would be the final verdict. They thought public opinion would be the judge. But none of them knew that heaven had already opened a case file and you were off limits by decree. What they violated wasn't just personal boundaries, they crossed into spiritual legal territory. And the moment they did that, the consequences kicked in. Not because you fought back, but because they breached a hedge God placed around you. That hedge wasn't there just to protect you, it was there as a warning. Do not touch, do not accuse, do not provoke. But they ignored every warning, and now they're the ones standing on trial, turning on each other as the evidence piles up. Their unity is breaking down because even they know something bigger than them is happening. Secrets are slipping, alliances are crumbling. The same people who whispered about you are now whispering about each other. They're all trying to escape the same courtroom they confidently dragged you into. The panic isn't just about getting caught, it's about realizing they were never in control to begin with. Heaven didn't just protect you, it exposed them by law, and now the case is unfolding publicly, slowly, strategically, because divine justice doesn't need noise, it just needs truth, and truth is loud enough without saying a word. Number 5, the attack was authorized by ego, not God. They were so convinced they were justified, so sure that tearing you down was necessary. In their minds, they built a whole case against you, based on offense, jealousy, insecurity, and assumptions. They hyped each other up, rehearsed the lies, rehearsed the reactions, and moved like everything was going to fall perfectly into place. But the one thing they didn't bother to check, whether heaven had approved the hit, and heaven didn't, that's where they messed up. Because in the spiritual realm, you can't just come for someone God has marked without consequences. Just because your ego is hurt doesn't mean you've been appointed to attack. Just because you're offended doesn't mean you've been authorized to destroy. But they acted like judge, jury, and executioner, when in reality they were nothing more than angry spectators who got too bold and stepped into a role that wasn't theirs. They didn't just act without permission, they moved against God's decision. And when you come against what heaven has already sealed, you're not just fighting a person, you're fighting the will of God.